All right, if you guys are just joining in, we are back in another video. Obviously, please go watch the first video. It's amazing. It's awesome. Anyway, so let's just dive into this thing.
Foundation
Trust me,
for
it's
how
important for
America
you.
fooled itself into income tax. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 grants Congress the constitutional authority to tax, saying this: Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. But alongside this power, the framers of the Constitution wrote into the Constitution a safeguard against overtaxation on some of the most important fundamental rights, things like life, liberty, and property. This safeguard is known as apportionment, and it happens in two places. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, which states, direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states. And Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4, which says, no capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before directed to be taken. Now don't worry, I'll explain what apportionment means in a little bit. Right now, if you can just say the word, I think we're moving in the right direction. Before we get into that, we need to understand the difference between direct taxes and indirect taxes. Believe me, if I could avoid explaining the difference between direct and indirect taxes, I would, but this is how we fooled ourselves, because nobody wanted to understand this. So, let's just do it, okay? Let's bravely go forward. Direct taxes are any tax that specifically targets people or property. They are things like property taxes, where you pay a specific percentage of your home's value every year. And because
That's
this is a direct
wild.
tax on
I
property,
don't think
apportionment does still apply, and it's
That's
also the
wild.
reason why property taxes don't really happen at the federal level. They happen at the county and at the state level. Another example is capitations, which nobody knows what that means. It's kind of an old word that we've replaced with fee today, but essentially a capitation is any direct tax on people. The most classic example of a capitation is a poll tax, which was a fee that you had to pay in order to be able to vote. Now, the 24th Amendment got rid of the poll tax, but still, any tax that's on people, regardless of wealth, income, where they live, social status, whatever it might be, just a flat tax on people just for being people, that's a capitation. One more example of a direct tax is a
Capitation.
wealth tax.
I like
Now,
that word.
this
Capitation.
gets thrown around a lot today,
Let me just tell you what we can do with that 2-cent wealth tax.
but don't be fooled by this. This is exactly what happened with the 16th Amendment. We're going to get to that. First, indirect taxes. Indirect taxes are anything that is not on people or property. Crazy. They are taxes on activities, transactions, use, or consumption. Tariffs and excise taxes are both examples of indirect taxes. This distinction between indirect and direct taxes is important because of how those taxes get treated in the Constitution. Knowing that property would be one of the natural rights most affected by taxation, the framers of the Constitution wrote in intentional safeguards to prevent against overtaxation on things like property and life. Remember, capitations.
Yeah,
Direct
yeah.
taxes on those things, the Constitution
Dang,
says,
that's
will
crazy.
require apportionment. See? Apportionment. I told you I'd get back to it. The Constitution says that direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states. What it is saying is that those taxes can be done, but only if each state pays into that tax in proportion to their total population. This is, quite frankly, a beautiful safeguard because it leaves direct taxation possible, but only in situations really of emergency or war. The reason for that is because apportionment is complicated and it hits each state differently, which means that it's very politically difficult to actually get done. Here's how it works. If Congress wanted to raise $10 million through, say, property tax, they could do it, but only if each state paid into the tax based on their population. So let's say Maryland has 1 million people, and this is 10% of the total population. Well, New York has 5 million people, and that is now 50% of the population. Well, under apportionment, Maryland would need to come up with $1 million into the tax, and New York, $5 million. Sounds easy enough, right? I don't see what the problem is. Well, play
That's
this out.
crazy.
We haven't factored in the value of property yet. If property values in the state of New York total $500 million, then New York only needs to charge a property tax rate of 1% in order to come up with the $5 million it needs. However, if property values in Maryland are just $20 million, then Maryland needs to charge a property tax rate of 5% just to come up with the $1 million that it needs to pay in. And this is exactly what makes apportionment so politically difficult, because it affects poorer states and richer states far differently. And the Constitution was designed this way intentionally, with direct taxes being discouraged as much as possible. All right, knowing all of this, let's take a hard right turn back to the 1894 income tax. Remember, at this time, big industry wanted to challenge the new income tax as an unconstitutional, unapportioned direct tax on property. And because the new income tax was unapportioned and aimed directly at property, there was pretty good legal grounds to challenge its constitutionality. Here's why. If a direct tax is any tax on property, then is a tax on income derived from property also a direct tax? This would be things like rental income or stock dividends, and no question like this had ever been asked before. So while there is a little bit of Supreme Court history leading up to this point, I'm actually going to skip over most of it because it doesn't actually matter all of that much, and I already made you sit through apportionment, which I think is enough for now. So in 1895, the case of Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust came before the Supreme Court, asking whether the 1894 income tax was constitutional. It asked one simple question: is a tax on income derived from property a direct tax? A man named Charles Pollock owned 10 shares of stock in Farmers Loan and Trust, a New York bank that would eventually become Citibank. When the bank announced that it would be paying the new income tax on dividends on behalf of its shareholders, Pollock sued to prevent the bank from doing so, arguing that it was an unconstitutional, direct, unapportioned tax on property. Well, what did the court find? It found in a split 5-4 decision that the tax was unconstitutional, stating this: first, we adhere to the opinion that taxes on real estate are direct taxes, and that taxes on rents or income of real estate are also direct taxes. Second, we are of the opinion that taxes on personal property or on the income of personal property are also direct taxes. This was a bombshell ruling, and while the court did say that taxes on incomes from sources not derived from property were still indirect taxes, this effectively killed any income tax. Remember, the reason for the 1894 income tax was an attempt to tax the wealthy, not the average American. And the problem with this ruling was that the wealthy derived most of their income from property. So if a tax on any form of property was now a direct tax, then a tax on the richest Americans was effectively impossible, because to be constitutional, it would require apportionment. Naturally, the Pollock decision sparked public outrage. Populists and progressives accused the court of protecting wealthy financiers. Newspapers warned that the ruling had fastened the burden of tariffs upon the country forever. And in general, most Americans were furious. And what do Americans do when we get furious about something? We exhibit calm, rational thought, examining all possible outcomes with prudence and grace, while we wisely and collectively make a decision for our republic. Just kidding. We hastily fixed the very specific problem of not being able to tax super rich people by giving away our own right not to be taxed. Yep. That's what we did, because we were promised by politicians and newspapers that it would only apply to billionaires. God, are we on the same road right now? Where's Elizabeth Warren when you need her? Lizzie! Can you call her Lizzie? So in 1913, America ratified the 16th Amendment, which says this: Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. I'm not going to take us back to legalese land, but here's what this means. This was the baseball bat that we used to fix the problem we should have solved with a razor blade. Instead of limiting congressional power to only what was absolutely necessary to tax the wealthy, by limiting how much the tax could be, or who it applied to, or what type of income it applied to, or literally anything, we just gave Congress the power to tax any and all incomes in whatever form they wanted to, and removed all the constitutional safeguards that we had against overtaxation of our most fundamental rights. I wish I was making this up. I wish this was a great fib. Oh, it was a great fib. We fibbed it. It's pretty shocking when you say it like that. This whole thing still just boggles my mind. Like, how did we let this happen? The reason why 40% of your paycheck comes out before you even get the money is because we thought we were trying to tax billionaires. And what's shocking about this is that somehow as Americans, we keep repeating this mistake. Do you remember the Patriot Act? We were so concerned about some old guy hiding in a cave with an old commie AK-47 that we gave away our digital privacy rights to the federal government forever. We just gave it away. It's the Patriot Act. If you don't agree with it, you're not a patriot with it. The House Ways and Means Committee said this: we encourage citizens to cheerfully support and sustain this, the fairest and cheapest of all taxes. The New York Herald said this: we have observed the emergence of the young man who overstates his income in order to be among those who are obliged to pay an income tax. They also further predicted that many $12 and $20 a week clerks will be waving an income tax receipt from the stool of his favorite quick lunch spot to show his value and standing in the commercial world. I want to throw up. As the U.S. became involved in World War I, this somewhat seemingly sleepy 16th Amendment that was only supposed to apply to billionaires began to do things it was never intended to do. With no additional language to safeguard the manner in which the 16th Amendment could be applied to incomes, things changed quickly. By 1918, the top marginal tax rate changed by over an order of magnitude. It went from 7% in 1913 to 77% in 1918. Now you might say, great, this was only meant to tax billionaires and it's doing exactly that, and we just had World War I, which we need to pay for. But what really happened is that this fundamentally changed the federal revenue from being reliant on tariffs and excise taxes to now being reliant on income tax. As a result, and seeing an unlimited source of federal revenue, the federal government went about solving the Great Depression in a manner that was wholly different than and how they went about solving problems after the Civil War. Instead of ceding economic, the federal government solved the great tools war. Instead of ceding economic development like it did with limited tools prior to the Gilded Age, this time the federal government solved the Great Depression with the New Deal through direct financial expansion of the federal government and federal relief programs. And it also implemented Social Security. And in order to pay for Social Security, another federal social safety net program, it had to implement an additional tax called the payroll tax. The payroll tax began as a combined 2% tax on employees and employers and is now a 15% tax today. And we can all be really glad it paid off because Social Security is going to hit its first round of insolvency in about 8 years. And then came World War II, fundamentally transforming the form of the federal government, adding millions of low and middle income Americans to the tax rolls. In 1943, federal withholding of paychecks began. This allows the federal government to take money before it even gets to you, to earn their own interest on it, and then to give you back what you overpaid the following April, all without interest. In my opinion,
SMH!
ladies and gentlemen, that is highway robbery. But
for a young Native entrepreneur to thrive, they have to.
Let's move on. By 1945, just 30-some years after the introduction of the first federal income tax was no longer a class tax on the wealthy. It was a mass tax paid by every single American worker. And today, the amount of federal revenue paid through income tax looks like this. It's the green line. The yellow line is, well, that's just payroll taxes, which is another form of income tax. And federal revenue collected by source now looks like this. Now, overall, I'm not going to get into the political arguments about whether income tax is all good or all bad or somewhere in the middle. The main point I want to get across is that it allowed this. And it
Dang, they had the biggest economic boom in like right after World War II. That is impressive. Dang, our grandparents really did grow up in a time of financial, like like financial greatness. I mean, we are. I mean, we're better off, but we are practically like I want to say like right up in here, like 1924 to 1922 to 24. Yeah, that's where we are right now. We need a big old like economic boom.
Was sold to the average American as a 1% tax on the wealthy. This should be all the proof that we need to show that governments will do, or eventually try to do, everything and anything that is within the power they have been given. They tend toward this in all circumstances, and that's why, as a people, we need to be very wary of long-term, broad language being used to solve short-term, very specific problems. Today, we often hear calls for a wealth tax, justified in order to get the wealthy to pay their fair share.
How about a wealth tax in America?
I have no doubt that the intention behind a wealth
Just from this video alone, I know for a fact that that's not going to inherently work all that well. Like I know that now. Okay, like it's gonna end up falling back on us, the American people, and it's just like I don't even know how you would describe it. It's just one of those things, I guess.
wealth tax is good, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And
That's wild. That's insane. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's insanity.
that, my friends, is the story of how America was fooled into income tax. So if you liked this video, please consider subscribing. I'll be releasing them every week. And thank you again for so many of the comments. It's a fun way to interact with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, dude, guys, like heard it here first. Yeah, go, dude, like I like this guy, so I guess go subscribe to Jake the Lawyer. You know, like he does a bunch of other videos. Um, yeah, I personally like him. I think that he's very good. I think that he could teach you a lot. So, but also like, share, subscribe. So, goodbye.